All right, so I'm going to throw it off to Ariel's first to introduce himself.
Well, I'm Aries above. I have 7 years of experience on Roblox and about 3 years of experience in Blender. And everybody's apparently bullying me in the chat. So who's
Um, then let's move on to Noir, if you would like to introduce yourself.
For sure. My name's Noir Splash. I'm the current owner of EBR, which is the Elite Builders of Robloxia. I joined Roblox back in 2009, and I've been building for about 3 years now, on and off. In terms of what I'm proud of on the platform, definitely EBR is one of my biggest accomplishments. It was big honor A, getting into EBR, and then B, now owning it. And the plans I have for EBR and the whole building community are pretty in depth, and I'm pretty excited to get into those. That's all.
Awesome. All right. Then let's move on to our final panelist, Ray.
Hi, so shall you Ray here, or you guys can just call me Ray because I don't realistically expect anyone to call me by my whole username. So I've been on the Roblox platform since 2007, so quite a long time. I was pretty well known back in the day for making Halo models. You guys might have seen like the Scarab tank in the catalog. Anyway, I get memed on for that being like my best known creation. It's from like 2009. I have been a member of EBR since 2011, and I was one of the original members of Shigeto. Now I'm one of the admins. I mostly just like to build architecture and robots. I'm also pretty into sailing, so yeah, I think that about sums it up.
All right, awesome. So now that we have introductions done, we're just going to jump right into the discussion portion of our event today. But before we do go into it, I just want to give a big thank you to everyone who has come to the event, and also a big thank you to EBR, RAR, and Shigeto for taking their time to partner up for this event and send in these panelists. So let's get into talking about the building community and the community itself. What got you guys involved in building on Roblox?
All right, well, hopefully the microphone's a little better now. I think what got me in the building originally was Originated Systemize, one of those old showcase users. He's the guy who built the Rip Your Toaster location and that airship station. And I've been a big fan of him ever since. And that's where I get most of my inspiration from, even now. It's just going back to his showcases, trying to improve on what I could.
For me, in terms of building, I've always been really interested in it in the platform, even since 2009 when I first joined. I've always been dabbling in Studio a little bit, but I got pretty serious about it a few years ago. As for in terms of like why I was interested in the first place, I've always had a huge interest in Lego before I joined Roblox, in terms of brick building and taking apart sets and making them into my own things and stuff like that. And it was really a blast. And that sort of creative niche was really filled for me when I could go onto Roblox and build anything I wanted that didn't require bricks or buying all this kind of stuff. And it was really took that cap off, and I could do whatever I want. In terms of people who inspired me, I think back in the day, I think Trust Me, I'm Russian was one of the first builds I really saw, because he did a build on Metro that was inspired by Metro Exodus, which is also my first big showcase. Dead End Underground was also inspired by Metro. And looking at that was I went, oh crap, I didn't realize people could do things like this on the platform, and it's really awesome. And then once I started getting into the community a little bit more, I developed more role models. One of which, Ariel's actually, some of his builds really inspired me. My friends and I used to go around into different showcases and look at them and analyze them and go, how do they do this, and the different techniques they use, and we would sort of replicate them on our own and get into building that way. So that's all.
Awesome. All right. Just a reminder, I will be posting their Roblox profiles down if you want to check any of their showcases. Now I'm going to throw it over to Ray to introduce why he got into building.
I just want to quickly add on to what Noir said about how we'll probably get into this in more detail later on in the panel discussion, but like going around with like your builder friends and like studying how other people make their showcases, that's been a really huge part of how I think like a lot of us built our skills, and definitely like how the platform like has progressed in terms of its like building advancement. But anyway, not going to get too far into that. So I have been around for a very long time, since December of 2007. The first people on the platform who really inspired me were Silent Swords and Jardicel, the latter of which was also like my mentor for building for quite a long time. So I definitely learned a lot from them. Probably part of the reason that I got into building hard surface and like sailing ships and likewise as well. Also similar to Noir, like I had built it with Lego as a kid. I really liked the program like Lego Digital Designer when I was really young, and that was like even before I started on Roblox. I've also been an artist for quite a long time, so just Roblox I kind of saw as another creative outlet naturally. I did almost leave the platform around 2015, 2016-ish. I'd probably say like the latter half of my career, which is like right now, started around the time Stinkguto opened up, which was around 2018. The thing that inspired me to come back was I started seeing like a new generation of showcase builders, and actually one of them is someone that Ariel's mentioned as well, Originated Systemized. I really liked his work because it had like a fantasy feeling that really reminded me of like artists on Pixiv, the platform Pixiv, like fantasy anime cityscapes by artists like Imperial Boy, Minoshichi, etc. And my other big inspiration was Totem, who's I guess I would consider a friend as well. And their showcases really like tell a story, which I really like, and it's something that I strive to do, and I don't think I've done quite as successfully as them, but yeah, I think that about wraps it up for my inspirations.
All right. Thank you so much for giving insight on that. So let's move on to talking about these communities that you guys have built up or are currently building up. So I guess I'm just going to start with asking, what are the differences between each building community? Because I know there's key differences between what Stinkguto, RAR, and EBR all represent. I'll throw it on the Ariels first.
Well, first of all, this needs to be thrown out there. RAR is single-handedly the best group to join. Stinkguto and Elite Builders of Robloxia have nothing on us. And
In a merch store.
Yeah, do you guys have a plushie? Because we got a Samuko plushie, Ariels.
That's right, we've got a Samuko.
no, we don't have that, but
You know what? Give him a few minutes to gas himself up.
I mean, we're trying here, man. But yeah, our group, it's a lot more general compared to the other two groups. You're able to join at any point in your building career, whether or not you're new or you're at the very end, like EBR. So we accept just about anybody with an interest to learn and an interest to build. And we still are the best group.
For sure. So EBR, for most of its lifespan, so that's 2009 until now, 2021, it's been mostly a collective of what are considered the top builders on the platform. So the way we work is, since 2009, we've been accumulating these people who are really talented in what they do, whether it's just straight brick building or more recently modeling and composition and all these things. And what I'm looking to do for it forwards is sort of turn it into a high-level resource for people who are maybe midway or late through their building career and their techniques and stuff like that. So while RAR more so has that big span of people who are just starting out to people who are just going up. We're more so for people who are at the end of their sort of building career, who've peaked, who have really put all the effort in. And then once you get in, we're going to start offering opportunities such as really high-level collaborative builds and different opportunities with people who are already established in the communities, people who have big games, and people who have made this their career. And then eventually also we want to start writing guides for people on sort of more complex subjects, such as like, for example, lots of like lighting and composition and more of the creative side and in-depth technical aspects of building, rather than just like how to use the move tool and how to rotate things and stuff like that. So on to you, Ray.
So Shigeto is a fairly new group compared to the other two. Actually, I hesitate to call it a building group because we have a wide variety of talent. We're not really a building group in the traditional sense. We're more of a creative community that centers primarily around the cyberpunk genre. I think the closest comparison you could make to other groups that exist would be Gearworks, which was active around 2015, 2016 as like a hub for steampunk enthusiasts. So in the same vein, Shigeto is a hub for cyberpunk enthusiasts. We do have a lot of builders, but we also have some scripters and musicians as well. Infinite Effect is the developer and one of the, he's the developer of Neon District. He's one of the co-owners at Shigeto. I'd probably say that what like stands our community apart that I don't really think a lot of other groups have done yet, anyway, because I know Ariels has just been looking to rip us off as much as he can, is that we've done annual community projects since the founding of our group in 2018. So each year we've done a community-sourced project where the members of the group will like build the layout and the templates, and then we'll hand those over to our Discord community, which currently numbers over 10,000. Subtle flex there. And have them submit their entries so that we can compile that into a massive community-sourced showcase, which I think is very cool because it's like one of the largest scale collaborations that I've seen done on the platform. So I'm very proud that our community has been able to accomplish that. Aside from that, I'd probably say that one of our objectives is just to spread the cyberpunk genre across the platform and get more people interested in it. And we try to do things to engage people and like get them like more in-depth on the genre outside of just the aesthetics. I definitely think we have a lot more to do in that regard, but yeah.
All right, thank you guys. So now I have one very important question to ask. Which one out of the three is the best group?
I don't know, man. I think we got the better group.
Okay, but did you did a small section of your group work on an egg hunt 4 years ago and revel in the glory of that?
But
yeah, that's what I thought.
Give Ariel a little bit
down.
of time. Give him
Do
a
you
little
guys
bit of
have
time to talk.
flushes? You know what? He has one thing that none of us do, and as soon as he figures out what that is,
He just needs a
over for
little bit of
us.
time.
he has a TikTok.
Oh yes, RAR has a TikTok, right? I'm actually curious. How are you guys handling the social aspects of promoting your groups?
We just made our TikTok not too long ago, so we definitely we still got to work on that. What you don't understand is we definitely think it's a great opportunity to get not only our group out there, but other people's showcases, since they do blow up on TikTok. And we want to feature more of our community that way. Not to mention, we also have a Twitter that we've been working really hard on, thanks to Paul, our moderator. And we also got a YouTube channel in the works where we're going to start recording time lapses, community tutorials, and things like that.
Oh, that's funny. We were, were we not just planning to do that, Evelyn?
Oh yeah, no, Ariel's. Sounds like you guys are copying the idea.
No,
of
no.
YouTube.
You know what?
No, I can't see. No,
he had the idea way before us,
the
clearly.
idea 3 years ago.
Shigeru is also looking to increase its YouTube presence. There's definitely like a big market to be captured out there. Speaking of which, I think that one thing that all three of our groups and anyone in the building community should all maybe like collaborate and look to do, to strive for towards, excuse me, pardon my words. I think that as a community, we should do more to push showcases into the public sphere to like kind of change the image of Roblox, because lots of people do insane things on Roblox. Like you hear a lot about like really impressive Minecraft builds, and there are like all these time lapses on YouTube. I feel like no Roblox group really does that, except Let's Blocks did that for a little bit, but I think they've largely fallen off doing that now. It'd be really great, in my opinion, if we could like show the broader public the type of things that we work on, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah, for sure. EBR, I know at the moment, the only real aspects we have in terms of communication with people who aren't in the group are through Twitter and recently through Discord, which you can join now. For the past like decade, actually, we've been pretty secretive in terms of you have to get in to communicate and talk to these people, but I thought that didn't really make too much sense in terms of growth and hogging all that to ourselves. So that's why I opened up our Discord server so that people can join and communicate with members, even if they aren't in the group themselves, so they can get tips and stuff like that. In terms of our YouTube presence, at the moment, we don't have any plans for any sort of YouTuber stuff, but I would eventually like to get into writing guides. So written guides, and probably on a website that we host as well.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm glad to hear that you guys are thinking to expand with RAR and YouTube, EBR, and the website. I know Shugo ourselves, we're trying to get more things going on with our social media. So check out everyone's social media. I will be posting links in the chat, so keep an eye out for that. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, I want to ask, what is the differences for you guys between group members and members of the community? Because I know with EBR, you guys have a public sector versus a private sector in the Discord. And with Shugo, we also have the Discord and then members and such and such. I'm curious to know what these are, and also I'm sure many people are also curious about the distinction between.
Starters, like we mentioned earlier, we're more like you start out in our group and then you work your way up through the ranks. So that's our way of dealing with the community, is just by being a lot more open, a lot more accepting, welcoming to new people, especially those who have just started out, need help, need resources and things like that.
As for EBR, since RAR fills that niche of like pretty much everybody from beginner to like expert at what they do, EBR's always sort of been reserved for that like top like 1% of builders who know all about what they're doing, and they have expertise over studio and nowadays even Blender as well. So when you join our Discord server, you've got our EBR members who have sort of been voted on, and they've sort of proven themselves and they've been there. And then we have members who aren't a part of the group and they can just interact. So it's very black and white. It's very like you're a member or you're not. We don't have ranks, anything like that. All the members in the group at the moment are still equal in terms of everything they can do. They all have the same privileges. Once you're in, and then that's it.
I actually think in terms of pure member count, Shigeru is probably the smallest of the three groups. There's a pretty common misconception, I guess, that we only look for super talented builders, and like, don't get me wrong, we do look for talent, but more than that, we look for people who are interested in cyberpunk and who are like willing to contribute to group activities. I would typically like advise people not to stress about getting in, because just being part of the community, you do get to engage in all of the activities that we plan. We are a fairly our server, I would say, is fairly good on engagement, just by virtue of like the community projects we host. By joining the Discord, like very few people become members, but I'd like to think that a lot of us are very open and communicative. I personally spend a lot of time in the creations channels, just like giving feedback to people and such. I've seen a lot of people definitely like grow their building skills over the course of being in the Stinkguto server. So I'd like to think that we make a positive difference in that regard. We also assign roles for people who participate in our group projects, and also for people who just post their creations. We host like community highlights on our Twitter, which I know people have been asking for more of. Don't get me wrong, we are definitely like, we don't have one for every single week, but we do try to get those out where we like just highlight the things that people are coming up with in the community, and we assign like highlight roles based on that. Yeah, I would say that like by joining the Stinkguto Discord, like you don't need to feel pressured to actually join the Stinkguto group unless you are specifically interested in helping us organize events. There's plenty of opportunity for people in the Discord to like take part in whatever it is that we're doing, which I think is one of our largest strengths.
Awesome. Well, now that we have that distinction between members and community out of the way, I want to ask something that I think a lot of people in the building community have, these questions of, what do you guys look for in applicants?
Well, I say the one thing we're definitely looking for right now is people who are willing to learn new things. Because speaking from personal experiences, I see a lot of people who are comfortable just with Studio, but not learning new tools like Blender, which is something I'm definitely guilty of. But that is the one thing we do want to see from more applicants in the future, is the willingness to use different and new and exciting tools on Roblox and for building showcases.
In terms of EBR, it's a little hard to get into the specifics of what we look for in applicants because, of course, the way it works is we have sort of an egalitarian voting system, so that once you become a member of EBR, you gain full rights to vote on any new applicants you get. So basically what the process goes through, you send us an application to our forum, we take a look at it. If it looks good enough to put up for vote in the first place, meaning it meets pretty basic standards, it goes up for vote, and then all of our members will look at it, they'll critique it, they'll look at every nook and cranny, and then to their own criteria, they will go through and they'll say like, okay, I don't like this, this was done really well, that kind of stuff, and then ultimately they'll leave either a yes or no vote. So because of that process and the way that we give so much freedom to people to vote based on their own criteria, it's definitely hard to pin down exact components and things you look for. But in general, if someone joins your game and the first thing they go, wow, that's a pretty good sign, because you want to leave a really good first lasting impression. And then you also want to make sure once they go, wow, they look in, they start analyzing it, that's also solid. They don't find basic mistakes such as Z-fighting or lots of like brick spam and very inconsistent detail and stuff like that. So in terms of common sense, just use your brain and try to be very thorough with what you do. And then for more information about that, you can also go to our new EBR 2021 handbook, and we've got a lot more in-depth details there for applicants and stuff like that. All right, on to you.
As I previously covered before, just briefly, at Stinkguto, we don't solely look for building skill. We've actually had quite a few applicants. So similarly as EBR, we have a application form through our website that will be reviewed by an internal panel, and if it passes some basic criteria, we move it on to voting. That being said, we've actually had some very talented people apply before who didn't get in because their work, while technically proficient, and they might have been, they might have like good credentials in other areas, but if we don't see interest in cyberpunk, then that really is the key factor that determines whether people get in or not, which I know seems very exclusive. And like, don't get me wrong, like we're not really seeking to expand. We prefer to have an active community over like a large and bloated one. That's just the nature of our group. I would have never predicted that we would get to the size that we're at now, but at the core of it, we're really just a group of enthusiasts. So I would definitely say actual interest in the genre takes precedence. We're looking to change our application criteria a little bit so that people can actually talk about their interests and not just like link their builds. That would definitely help for our screening process because we can't get to know every applicant that applies just by looking at their build. Although a lot of the time by visiting the entries, you can tell to a degree, like kind of what Noir was saying about like the wow factor. You can really tell the difference between someone who's building something out of their personal interest and someone who's just building something to hop on a trend. So we tend to overlook a lot of the entries that are only submitted to hop on trends, which I know Cyberpunk is quite a trend at the moment. Another criteria that we've been taking more seriously lately is likelihood for that member to engage. So Stinkguto is not a badge of recognition, or at least I don't like to think of it as one, in the way that EBR is a stamp of being a great builder, which I don't think that's a problem whatsoever. That's the purpose of EBR. That's what the group was founded for. At Stinkguto, we don't want people to apply just to say that they got in. We want people who are in the group to actively help us expand our presence and give new ideas for our direction. So we're looking into ways that we can screen that more effectively, maybe with short interviews or things like that. But I'd definitely say that interest and engagement are the two things we look at just as much as we look at talent.
Interesting. Yeah, it's cool to see that distinction between all three groups and how each of you guys treat the applicants. Moving on to a topic that's related to this, what are some common themes that you guys actually see in applicants? I know that each of you have brushed onto the topic a little bit. What are some common themes that would deter you from allowing these applicants in?
I'd probably definitely say there are a lot of free models nowadays that are being used. Like a lot of these new entries have a lot of the same free model trees and rocks, and like this over reliance on assets they did not make. And that's definitely one thing we want less of in our applications, and it's definitely a big trend I've noticed as well as my staff. What about y'all?
Personally for EBR, it's pretty hard to explain, but whenever I look at a applicant's builds, there's definitely this certain factor that separates a build from being the best from sort of like not quite meeting it. And that mostly applies for builds that are teetering on the brink between like yes and no votes, maybe like 50-60% approval rate. But I'm pretty sure, if I could put that into words, that feeling is sort of whether or not a builder A is passionate and spend a lot of time in their build, and B, the little tiny details, not like physical details, but details in the way that they build and stuff like that, like how thoroughly they check. So things like if you see a little bit of Z fighting or certain little things out of place, or if the scaling is off or the atmosphere just isn't quite right, that can be a big turnoff for a lot of our members when they're voting, because as I said, there is a big technical aspect to it. Like we definitely look at how far along you are as a builder and your expertise and the technical little aspects and stuff like that. But there also definitely is this sort of artistic feeling of, are they there yet? And does it make me go, wow, when I join the game? And is the atmosphere nice? And does this feel like an experience and that kind of stuff? So as for mistakes, I would recommend putting effort to not just focus on the technical aspects of like how well I can one-to-one create this new prop, and also focus on things like atmosphere and what does this make people feel, and definitely treat it as a work of art, because then you can impress our members and you're much, much more likely to get in.
So I would say In order to build cyberpunk, you need a very in-depth understanding of urban culture and architecture. Because the urban space is just a very inherent thing to the philosophy and culture of cyberpunk as a genre. Like, for example, there are countless essays, many of which I've read in university cinema studies, studying the use of urban space to communicate like social themes in the movie Blade Runner. I understand that not everything represented in cyberpunk has to take place in the city, but because it is a genre that's so built on humanism and the way technology transforms human communication, the natural space for this philosophy to take place in is the city. So in that sense, it's very easy for us to tell when people attempt to build cyberpunk without an inherent understanding of the urban space. A lot of entries we get will have people from more generalist backgrounds attempt to cyberpunkify their work by simply changing colors and adding neon, which is something that we meme on quite a lot. No offense to those people, they just have a lot to learn. It's nothing against them, but we can definitely spot a difference in builders who are very comfortable and familiar with the urban space as it reflects in real life and in popular culture, such as Blade Runner, Akira, Ghost in the Shell, etc. That's something that we're able to spot because most of us are familiar with it ourselves. We tend to reject the entries that are just generic alleyways that have neon signs in them. Our members, just to give a few examples of like showcases within our community that highlight very good understanding of the urban space. Like I would say Infinite Effects Neon District is an obvious example. And then Awai Shijin's Midnight in Japan is a very good look at contemporary Japanese culture and architecture. I'm sure I could list any number of examples, but that's typically what we look at. We do hope to find entries now and then that are a little bit different in their content. For example, I don't think everything has to take place in an alleyway, because the urban space of a cyberpunk city is not solely regulated to alleyways. There's quite a large world high above as well. You can look at works like Altered Carbon on Netflix, where like the rich people live above the clouds and the poor people live in the alleyways. I'd like to see people attempt more of that sort of thing, showing the class dynamics within cyberpunk culture. Yeah, and I guess that all applies mostly to building as well. We also do have people who do art and music, and we don't have quite as many of those, so I guess our requirements aren't quite as defined when it comes to those categories, but yeah, overall, like going back to just what I was saying earlier, it's the combination of interest in the genre and technical talent.
Along those lines, I'm curious, Ray, how does Shigudo, or rather the Shigudo members feel about the vibe genre, or sort of that new trend of games that are sort of just very heavy, like neon pink, blue, lots of lo-fi sort of music, the rather lo-fi and vibe genre as opposed to Shigudo? Because I know those people get confused between lo-fi and cyberpunk a lot. I'm curious how they get.
I see what you mean, and I think it's very much because the vibe genre, which you and Gasaf, a member of Shigudo, I would say that the two of you like did a large part in popularizing that with Vibe Station, if I'm not mistaken.
Of course, yeah.
I definitely think that people get lo-fi and cyberpunk conflated because modern depictions of cyberpunk tend to feature very colorful neon colors and like that sad boy music. We've definitely like have gotten applications in the past that were like your very typical by now, like depressed apartment with lo-fi music. I think Totem did it very well with their Fentonist and -3. I don't think that everybody else necessarily does it quite as well. I can't speak for the opinion of the whole group regarding Vibe games. I think it can be done well. For instance, I think Vibe Station was done very well, in large thanks to the fact that the three of you that worked on it are very talented. And Gustaf being one of our members, I'm sure he knows what he is doing. I don't really like, personally speaking, I can't speak for everyone else, I personally don't really like that Cyberpunk has devolved, in a sense, away from its ideological roots, and rather people only see it for its aesthetic, especially because people assume that it can only take place in Japan or China or any other Asian country. I don't necessarily agree with that notion. I think those were just historical interpretations of Cyberpunk. I don't personally like that it's being watered down purely to like repetitive aesthetics, because I think there's a lot more to it. But again, like, you can tell when it's done well, and you can tell when people are doing it just to hop on a trend.
So, I mean, while Ray's gone, I just want to talk about, like, I guess community projects with you guys, because I know Ariel's with RAR, you guys have been like doing really well with activity recently, and just being super active on social media, promoting events, doing community events, build offs, all of that. Can you give more insight on those?
First of all, it's definitely a big thing to have over on my server. They do a lot of work for the server, and honestly, it's kind of sad we don't get paid for it, because the level of quality they do for the moderation is just, it blows me away sometimes. If it wasn't for them, working so hard on these aspects of our group, we would not be as active as we are right now. But it definitely helps a lot that we have somebody like Ink Waves, for example, who has UGC on his side and has like a large treasure of Robux he can support a server with. And we definitely plan on doing more events like this, big building group events, sponsoring with like different people who sponsor it with big prizes like that, because it just helps out our server so much. Since I think we're definitely right behind EBR in terms of active users and size of the server.
Yeah, but you guys are still quite a bit away.
All right,
from
pardon me,
Stinkguto.
don't blame me. Blame Rogers.
Oh. No, I was just saying, we're kind of showing off that 10,000. No, I'm kidding.
EBR at the moment, we definitely don't have a very big public presence. Of course, we've always been pretty small. We've got about 500-ish members in our Discord server, and a few active people, but definitely we've fallen into a bit of a rut in the past while, and I'm working pretty hard, of course, with the new guidebook and the new applications to get it more active. Group projects, while we don't have any in the works right now, we're definitely looking to work on some. And I think the way we're going to go about it was we're going to take a very, very structured approach, probably even more so than Stinkguto's infamous sort of group projects. We're probably going to have sort of a familiar outline in terms of group projects with Stinkguto, where we might have people allowed to contribute to these group projects that aren't in the group, as of like ways, primarily to sort of scout out new members who wanted to contribute something to our project, so that we can probably get some invites through there, and also just for people to get a little bit more engaged. And I'm also considering a sort of outline where we have a phase system, so that way we can assign people to certain parts of the project and then assign them to a phase, so that like, for example, phase 1 goes do, and they do blocking, and then they do atmosphere and stuff like that. Then phase 2 goes in and they do sort of small props and then asset building, and 3 puts it all together. So then that way it's very structured and very professional. And the main problem with EBR at the moment is we've got a lot of people in the group who have been here for a very long time, and very different building styles and techniques and stuff like that. Because obviously someone who was the best of the best 8 years ago isn't, not saying they aren't, but saying they likely won't be like sort of the same exact level that our most recent members are. So I definitely want to tune into the creative aspect and let those people contribute and show that they're still very, very talented artists, even if they aren't amazing on the technical side. And I also want to make sure that anything EBR puts out is up to par with what we let in. Because obviously, if we are turning away people who are pretty good but not quite there, and we're saying like, oh, this was bad, and then we show those mistakes ourselves in our own projects and our own builds, that's a bad look and it's not fair. So the main issue right now is we're trying to find a solution so that we can get those builds out and have something very high quality that people will go, wow, and it'll fill our own criteria. You know what I mean? So that's all.
I agree there that the one consistent thing that's been true about EBR since the very beginning is that while the technical skill level has changed, the artistic talent has always. I don't know how much was said about Stratosphere while I was gone. And again, blame Rogers, don't blame me. Rogers is a very terrible internet provider. It just goes down here and there. I do think that very early group projects on the Roblox platform, since the very inception of Team Create, like Stratosphere Settlement was, I think, one of the very first exhibitions of Team Create handled broadly, like ever done on the platform. And I actually participated in Stratosphere Settlement. I wasn't one of the main contributors. I just added a few props here and there. But I definitely do think back then it was a little bit easier to unify builders and like, how would you like mobilize a large group of people to work on the same thing? Because back then Roblox was very comparable to Minecraft in the sense that like people had quite similar building styles at the time. I definitely think as the direction of Roblox building has progressed and styles have gotten so diverse, and also the platform's become a lot more monetized, people have largely gone away from group builds in the same vein that they used to. Before Stinkguto, I think Gearworks had that like big flying castle, which is still one of my favorite group projects of all time, and that was around 2015 or 16, I think. Actually, Ariels, were you around for that one?
I was on Roblox at the time, but I feel like it is very important to mention that I just became the admin of Gearworks, and that we are planning on doing a big Gearworks revival, and that's in the works right now. So, yeah, I kind of technically represent RAR and Gearworks, by the way.
Oh, cool. Would you guys generally agree that it has been harder to mobilize group projects on the platform as of recent years, just considering the shift in direction that the platform has taken?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. We've tried a group project just sort of spontaneous without very much coordination. And it was pretty hard to get into just because of the fact that, as you also mentioned, there's a lot of inconsistency in building styles. Of course, people may have the same ideas and a lot more input about composition and stuff like that. Everyone has wildly different styles because, of course, back when Stratosphere was created, you were fairly limited in what you could do. So where once you just had to put down parts, now you have to integrate parts with meshes and then get someone to texture those meshes and make sure that it works with the lighting and particle effects and all these different things. So for a job that now was for maybe 5 people is now for someone maybe like 15 people, and people who are a lot more sort of specialized in what they do. So it's definitely hard to get a like sort of fill your roster out and get all those people who can fill all those slots, and then also make sure that they will work on a schedule and make sure that they're motivated for the build and that all of the ideas are getting listened to, and then everyone gets to equally contribute and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I definitely would agree that it's a lot harder to mobilize builders these days.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's very interesting, though, that like I would say to a degree that Stinkguto paved the way for the direction of group projects going forward. Not to give ourselves too much credit, but I think it would be fair. I think it would be fair to say so, but I think it's very like Noir, the new EBR project that you're planning, seems to be like a development of the format that we've established, and
Absolutely.
I think that's it. Kind of like reflects how the building community at large over the years has always been built atop learning from people who innovate over and over until. So I don't think that throughout the past 10 years, there's ever really been large-scale attempts for centralized building knowledge to be dispersed. I think the dev forum does do that now, and like EBR is planning to do that now, but definitely in the earlier years, the only way that we could learn how to build was by visiting other builders. So I would grab a few of my friends and I'd go to whatever new showcase was out, and we try to figure out how people do things. I remember like Stuntman 007, he might be under a different name now, I'm not sure. He put out like an amazing airship showcase back in maybe 2011, 2012. And it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. And we had no idea how he did it until we really studied it. And then, over time, while that used to be considered amazing, that became the new norm for builders back then. And that incremental process would happen over and over while builders learned from each other, incrementing on the techniques of past builders, and then passing that on to other people as well. So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting observation that we've kind of been continuing this tradition, even in the form of group building.
Definitely. I mean, as an example for something like that, how builders take what other people have done and they iterate upon them. I know personally, an example between you and I, someone told me about the sort of color 3 decal trick where you go into the color 3 value of a decal or a texture and you sort of crank it up so it sort of overflows and is like 1,000, 1,000, 1,000 rather than the limit of 255.
Oh yeah, I think Gasop's the one that told me about that trick.
Yeah, and I told him about that, and I don't remember who told me. I didn't come up with it, but someone told me about it, and I told him, and then you were told, and you turned it into something amazing by integrating the sort of functional aspect where you made those trees that change color, and you integrated the point lights into them so that they glow more. And that's just really
I found
an
a very
example.
interesting behavior. I found a very interesting behavior of increasing the color 3, which is that as the color 3 increases, the exposure to the bloom effect also increases. So by setting a decal to like 3,000 instead of the maximum 255, you just put a point light next to it, and then that thing starts to glow in a very, very distinct way. And yeah, I had my little tree experiment based on that. I also found out you can increase like the outdoor ambient under lighting above 255. There are a whole ton of settings you can increase actually. Fog.
As a quick
255.
side note about that, you just reminded me with the whole outdoor ambient thing. There was a sort of very, very small group of people who were trying to create a sort of cartoon look in Roblox by abusing that outdoor ambient value. They would turn it up to like 10,000 and they would turn the shadow sharpness up really high, and they would do a bunch of little adjustments, and the effect would be that it wasn't perfect. It wasn't good enough to use in anything.
Oh, I think it was it mimicked a cell shading sort of.
Yeah, sort of like cell shading, where where the lighting like that would be super contrasted, and then they would mix it with things like inverting meshes so that you could see it would sort of create an outline around the main mesh and that sort of thing, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I've seen experiments with that sort of thing, but I haven't seen a lot of like widespread application of it in showcases particularly. I definitely like to see people push experimentation further in that regard. I know I was trying to do that with my Neon Trees project, but due to performance related reasons, I can't really work on that right now. We'll see if optimization in the future changes that. I think Realism actually offered to help me with optimization, because having point lights change the color of trees and then operate based on a script is very performance costly.
I'm just gonna have to interject because while the conversation's really good, but we have just hit 4:00, so I'm gonna delay the Q&A session just a bit, because I do think that a lot of the questions we have can be answered with other stuff. So I'm gonna continue on and just ask, just to close off this portion of the panel discussion, is there a possibility of a collab between all three groups and more coming in the future?
Well, kind of know the answer to that, and we've just been holding it in.
I'm totally up for it. That's
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like a lot of fun
Yep.
to me.
I know a lot of the EBR members are really sort of craving collaboration, and they really want to do a group project. So whether we do a thing on our own, or if we all three of the groups collaborate and we do something beautiful together first, whichever one comes first, I would totally be down for it, and I'm sure a lot of people in EBR would also be very excited for that.
I think it really just comes down to finding an idea that all of our groups can settle on. I think the idea has been thrown around to like create a hub world for all of our groups, and then a few of our other partners, including Let's Blocks and the was it the Roblox Showcase community?
Roblox
Studio
Studio
community. Yeah.
Right, the Roblox Studio community. We've been throwing around the idea of like creating a hub world sort of thing, but no solid ideas as of the moment.
Yeah, well, that is interesting and exciting news for everyone who is currently in the chat, because if there's a big collab, that just means more chances to show off your building and other talents. So at this time, I'm going to move over to some of the curated questions that we were given before this event. So let's go in and just start it off. From a Japanese Limits, a question for all three of you guys is, if you weren't a builder for Roblox, where would you be today?
That's a good question.
Thank you for your very introspective words, Ariels.
Problem. I'm here all day.
That's a rough question for me. Thinking about it, if I wasn't into building was definitely something that was really good for me, because I've been through a lot of places in life, and this is definitely something that was a great opportunity for me, because it was something I really loved doing. I had a huge passion for it. I knew a lot about it because I've been on the platform for a long time, and I've always really loved video games, and specifically game design. Like, something I want to work towards is, instead of just being a builder, I want to work into game design, like why do people play games, how to keep them playing, what makes things fun, that kind of stuff. If I wasn't on Roblox, I think one of my plans was, I'm pretty strong in English in terms of language. And I'm pretty good at picking up other secondary languages as well. So I think my idea was, briefly, I wanted to be an English teacher in Japan, because they have a pretty high demand for native speaking English speakers there. Or I would have taught French, because I'm Canadian as well. So they teach French here normally. So if you're a French teacher, native English speaker, there's also a lot of opportunities there.
I think if I wasn't on Roblox at the moment, I would just be pursuing my other creative interests, such as like 3D modeling, art, digital art, and photography. I've always been aiming to like get a career in the artistic field or in the entertainment industry, maybe in cinema or like film VFX, which I'm still aiming for. I do think that to a degree, Roblox takes time away from my other professions, but I don't really mind it, because I've definitely made a lot of connections on here and a lot of people who've been striving towards those same. So yeah, while I might have been farther along in some of my other like creative endeavors, I do attribute a lot of my experience to the Roblox platform.
Awesome. Yeah. I think we can all agree that building has impacted us positively, right?
Well, yeah, super positive impact in terms of me.
Yeah. All right.
It's driven me crazy personally.
I can't stand it anymore. You'll see my account.
Can you elaborate on that, Ariels?
Well, says the one who was going to quit and then came back. Not even a day after, in fact.
No, give me some credit. It was at least a week. But thanks, you know.
You were just working on Springs Rock in secret. Don't lie to us.
Yeah, it's true. I had an alt account that I was using to work on my showcases during that time.
Oh
So that
no.
way I wouldn't appear online.
Conspiracy theory? All right. So let's move on to our next question from CSAs. The question is, what types of what types of plugins do you find to be the most rewarding towards your builds?
And the brush tool. That's
Oh
where,
my god, yes.
yeah, you can save your models and just clean them all over the place.
Actually, the collaboration that me and Ariels have been working on as of late, well, as of the past few years, actually, our pirate port, I've gotten a whole lot of use out of Brush Tool for that project, actually. I don't think I could have made all that progress in the past few days if it weren't for the Brush Tool plugin. So big props to Brush Tool.
Personally, I used a lot of Brush Tool when I was working on my Umbara Battlefront build because it was very sort of lots of vegetation, lots of plant life, and to get all that stuff down really fast in a way that looks pretty good, it's pretty necessary. But usually I work on things that are a lot smaller, and I'm pretty meticulous when I build. So even when I use Brush Tool, I definitely go in and I readjust things very, very often to get them perfectly where they are. In terms of my main plugins that I cannot go without, Archimedes 2 is an amazing plugin that is really, really useful. Basically what it is you can select a part and then you can basically duplicate it at any angle. So it's amazing for creating curves, circles, angles, any sort of shape if you know the degree angle of that shape. So if you want to make like a pentagon, for example, you just put in 137 and it'll make 5 parts that exactly align up the corners for the angle you want. So that's something I can't go without. That's an amazing plugin.
137 degrees. Interesting. I have a weird like thing with the number 137. It keeps popping up all over the place. The length of a Venator class Star Destroyer is 1137 meters, which contains the number 137. Just random stuff like that. I wonder if 137 degrees relating to pentagons has anything to do with it, because they're not. It's not a string of prime numbers. I've never. Anyway, off topic.
Yeah, and then a bit of a plug. Studio Build Suite by one of our members, Fractality, is also an amazing plugin. I know a lot of people use F3X in Studio to build. Not something I personally use. And if you're looking for an alternative that lets you do basically the same things, but it's a lot less sort of intrusive, Studio Build Suite, or SBS for short, is really helpful, and it lets you sort of expand upon Roblox's default tools. It's a lot more accurate in terms of moving. You can move and rotate a lot of objects at once based on a pivot or on one object or per their own axis and stuff like that. And learning the hotkeys for that and having that open will definitely help you streamline your flow and get things done a lot faster.
I'm definitely a huge advocate of SBS too. Just because Fractal is responsive to any questions I have about the plugin, and also it has its lineage in like the command utility or CMD UTL plugin, which I've used for many years. So I always saw SBS as a very natural progression. It has a lot of very useful non-default studio features that I would highly recommend, and it has a very non-intrusive interface as well with hotkeys. So I would definitely pick SBS as my building plugin of choice. I think Gapfill was mentioned in the chat, and I definitely get a lot of use out of Gapfill for my hard surface builds, although I do a lot of that in Blender now. But Gapfill is very useful. Archimedes. I'm just trying to think. One that I don't hear.
Ray, the reflect tool.
Yes, Stravon's reflect tool, which I don't know why you wouldn't use it, but Evelyn hadn't been using it until lately.
A lot of Stravon's plugins are actually very useful. I know he makes a lot.
I'd say download all of his.
They just have very universal application. So I think all of them, Resize Align as well, they're very useful. One that I don't hear talked about a lot is the Model Scopes plugin. And basically what that lets you do is click a model, and then you can enter that model, and it'll basically stash everything else in the workplace in a separate temporary storage, allowing you to focus on just the model that you selected. It's also recursive, so you can go several steps into models within that model, and then you can go out of that scope when you're done, and it'll put everything back in the workspace. It's very useful for isolating objects you want to work on without, having other things in the way. So model scopes, I also enjoy very much.
Yeah. I mean, can we ask SBS to like sponsor us all? Because we basically all use it. I don't know about you, Ariels. Do you use SBS?
No, I belong to the default tool.
Oh, wait, really?
Honest.
Oh my god. How do you do it? I can never use the default tools.
I already said building drives me crazy, so it's part of the process. It just adds a little touch of insanity to everything I do.
A little sprinkle on there. Sprinkle on top.
Yeah, just like how I build with 0 degrees and 0 studs.
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask all of you guys. What are your increments? Because personally, for me, I actually switched off of using 0.1 to just using 1, like 0.5, 0.25, those numbers. What do you guys use?
I'm a very big advocate of the multiples of 0.05. 0.05 is the smallest measurement you can have for a part. So for me, it naturally makes sense that you work in doubles and halves of 0.05. So for my blockouts, I'll use 0.2. For refining those blockouts, I'll use 0.1. And for details, I go down to 0.05, 0.025, and so on. I will sometimes switch to the 0.5 and 1, 2 kind of scale for certain things, which is very easy because in SBS you can just hit tab and then type in 1, hit enter, and it changes your increment on the fly. You can also use 2 and 3 to double and half. So yeah, I tend to stick with multiples of 0.05.
Yeah, personally, I'm the exact same, and the way I think about it is sort of in imperial versus metric, where 0.05 and 0.1, etc., are the metric equivalent in this equation, and 0.125 and 0.25 and 0.5 and stuff like that are the sort of imperial half of it, where 0.05, as Ray said, makes a lot of sense because it's the smallest you can get a part without using plugins. And then I normally keep it on 0.1, and that's my default. And if I need something really detailed, I'll go smaller. If I need bigger increments, I'll go bigger. No hate against anybody who uses 1.125, but it doesn't make too much sense to me because the concept of using half, quarter, eighth, 16th of one stud doesn't really work for me. It doesn't really I understand the sort of 0.1 better because I was taught metric in school, and it really falls into okay, how big's a stud? Well, it's 10 times 0.1, and then how big is 10 studs? It's 10. You know what I mean? So it makes more sense for me to use that because it also works better if you're scaling up as well, because 0.1 still fits into 1, whereas 0.125 doesn't really fit into 5 very much. You know what I mean?
By following the 0.05 increments, you don't get down to decimal places until you go lower than 0. So
exactly.
It's a lot more convenient for aligning. That's just my side of the argument, though. No hate for anyone that does use the 0.25, the 0.51 increments, but I prefer the multiples of 0.05 personally.
Absolutely.
I actually had a funny story about this. I was working on a map, and C says in the chat, just put in 0.4382, and that was actually the map that I was working on was made by someone else, and I think they resized it in the process because every increment was like 0.4382, 0.9128 or something like that, and it just made me want to cry.
I know there's a lot of people who use no increment. They just have move ticked off.
Oh my god.
No hate against people who use 0.125. If you're someone who uses no increment at all, except for niche cases like animating, I know you need no increment for that. But if you're someone who is just brick building with no increment on, I would strongly suggest to start using an increment. You run into a lot of issues with no increment in terms of alignment and things being symmetrical when you end up when they're in their final product, and also floating point error once you get farther away from 0. Using no increment it's very, very awful and becomes very hard to work with.
I would argue that the one use case for no increment is if you're primarily building with meshes. The thing about primitive parts in Studio is that they're rectangular. It's very easy to notice when there's alignment issues up close, which often happens when you use no increment. And to be honest, if you're using no increment and you're resize aligning everything, just like save yourself the hassle and use an increment. That's my opinion, because then you won't have to resize align everything. If you're using meshes, like parts that have non-standard dimensions, it's less noticeable if there are seams and alignment errors. And for some people that can have more of a natural feeling, a natural build feeling, if I'm just placing down like bushes and forests and stuff like that, I don't really think increments are a big deal. But definitely if you're working with primitive parts and you're not using an increment, like, I don't personally know why people do that, but...
The chaos. That's why I build with 0 degrees. It kind of reminds me of my group sometimes. It's just chaotic when you least expect.
Yo, shout out to the RAR streaming party, watch party right now, who is like the chaos. If you can see the chat with them is great.
They're definitely all riled up for this. That's why neither one of y'all should challenge our group.
You have your niche. I think we're going to take on something else that we can go. I don't really want to take on RAR's niche of everything. A very not so niche.
Scared of the group. You scared you lose a build off.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So Still by C says, the next question is, how does lightning influence your build? And if so, is there a specific style you usually stick to? And I'm actually curious because Nor, I know you got something cool to talk about with the nighttime setting of your showcase.
To clarify, is this person asking about lightning or lighting?
Oh, lighting! Oh my god, I said this earlier before the event started. I need to like brush up on my pronunciations because yeah, sorry. I mean lighting. Like
No worries.
lighting.
I mean, yeah, I guess I can go first with this because it's something I definitely really enjoy. If you look at a lot of my showcases, especially in particular Mist, Wooded Creek and its night variant, they're not all too impressive in terms of actual brick building. You know what I mean? Like, of course, there's a little bit there, but it's nothing super impressive. They're definitely lighting showcases and atmosphere showcases. And those are the things I really enjoy. I really like sort of setting up lighting and setting up a scene and putting in sounds and all these little details and all that kind of stuff. In terms of that trick you were talking about, I think Ray might have a little bit to contribute to this as well. For making a night scene, a lot of people will sort of default to just setting it to night in the lighting settings. Like, oh, it's nighttime now
put
because
the
it's
sun
night.
down, put the sun down, and then set the ambient to black. That's what people do. Yeah.
What I do for night scenes and what you'll see a lot of experienced builders doing is setting outdoor ambient to blue, because basically the way that lighting settings work is ambient affects all shadows generated by objects. So if something casts a shadow on the sun, that's what ambient is. Outdoor ambient affects anything. It affects the outdoor area, so it won't affect caves, but it'll affect anything hit by the sun. And then also color shift top will just affect the lights and not the shadows of anything outside. So what you want to do for a night scene is actually make it day, just full-blown day,
Just change
the
the skybox. Don't put the sun down.
Yeah, change the skybox to a night skybox, change outdoor ambient, and color shift top to blue, because then that way with that, blue is still a darker tone on the term of color spectrum. It'll make it look quote unquote dark outside, and it'll actually give it a sort of effect where you can still see shadows outside, which you can normally, especially if there's a full moon, and you can see moon rays, and it'll look beautiful. And as long as you keep in mind that it's still technically day in the game and you work around that, it creates for a really, really awesome, beautiful effect.
Thank you for saying all that. Yeah, that's actually a similar technique that we use in Stinkguto group projects like Centurion and Neon Market. And what I personally use in like my Neo Hong Kong showcase, which is not public and still hasn't been public after years. But yes, setting the clock time to night is not the only thing that goes in to making a nighttime scene. You can actually get away with having you can replace the sun with the moon. And in that sense, just treat day lighting as if it were night, set the shadows to blue, and then you get a much more realistic and much more grounded effect than if you just set the clock time and then set your ambient to some very dark shade of gray. I think it looks very dull and unrealistic when people do that, and definitely a lot of beginners tend to gravitate towards that because it just seems to make sense. Like, if you want it to be night, set the clock time to night. But yeah, as we've kind of explained, like there are alternate, more advanced ways to go about doing that.
Yeah, that sort of brings me on to a point as well with, I would really like to talk about color shift top, because I feel like people mess with the day-night and they mess with the brightness and ambient a lot, but I don't see people using, especially low to mid-tier builders, don't really use color shift top. It's really, really useful for outdoor scenes because light, like the light from the sun isn't white, right? It comes down, it's a little bit yellow tinted, and depending on what's in your scene, light actually bounces off that and can change color. For example, if you're in the jungle and everything is lots of green plant life and stuff like that, if you're on the jungle floor, it's not going to be white light beaming down. It's going to be that yellow tone, and then it's going to bounce off those green tones. So you're going to get more of like a greenish sort of yellowy tone, which you can set color shift top to, and make your scenes a lot more believable. And that sort of applies for anything. If you're underwater, you set it to more of a blue because it's reflecting through that, right? And if it's daytime in like sort of like a forest or whatever, you can get more of those yellow tones coming out during the fall and stuff like that. And I would definitely recommend experimenting with not just color top, but all of the new, all of the existing and new lighting settings. So of course they added atmospheres as well, and all that kind of stuff. I really encourage people to experiment with lighting more, because no matter how amazing you are with just like straight on building, if you can add those extra layers of like amazing lighting and sound and all these little features that immerse you in the experience, people are going to be a lot more amazed when they first see it.
Exactly. And going back to an answer to the general question, how does lighting influence our showcases? I think that when you have your lighting and atmosphere set, everything else just sort of falls into place. When your lighting is... What is this man doing?
I was reading the RAR chat. I was going to say, if he does that, I'm going to kick him. But you know what?
Right.
You know what, Ariel's... I guess this is a direct hit towards you, Noir. How do you feel about this?
If he want to shoot shots, he can, but it doesn't affect me. I'm not hurt by that at all. It doesn't mean anything to me. If I give a response, it's gonna show that it bothers me. It doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah. All right.
And Noir is ooh-wooing deep inside.
I guess, can we move on to the next question then?
For sure.
Unless,
you know, I actually
had something to say that wasn't just trash.
No. I actually have a question for Ariel's. Let me see if I can find this one. There was a question here. I remember.
Please don't.
Specifically, just for Ariel's. Oh, here we go. Okay, it's not the one you think, Ariel's. Okay?
Oh no, that
So-
makes it worse.
From Coolio guy, right? He asked, "Why does Stinkguto stink? Why is EBR known as Elite Builders of Robloxia? And why is RAR best waifu?"
That is such an RAR thing to do. I have no response. It just sounds like us on a good day.
On a good day.
Yeah. It's pure chaos. It's like you turn over a rock and it's just like you don't even expect what you see under there half the time. But they are very good questions. I would like to know the answers to that. Do y'all care to explain?
I think you're wrong.
Good input, Ray. I'm gonna have to go with Ray on this.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Stinkguto, but I'm sure you guys have stink waves. Shout out. I'm sorry. I'm kidding. We love you,
mean,
Inkwaves.
Yeah, we love Inkwaves.
We
We love
that
Inkwaves.
kind of
Everyone,
shit.
if you're here in the chat, go purchase some stuff from Inkwaves in the
The
catalog.
fact no. The fact is, Inkwaves is like Febreze compared to Stinkguto. That's just the sad fact.
Yeah, he's literally radiating waves of stink. It's in the name, it's not in ours.
That's what I'm saying. He's by comparison like a field of flowers.
All
A
right.
sticky field of flowers. Alright, next question.
All right, next
please.
question. Here, this question, I was talking with Ray earlier about this actually. So this is from Inner Brian, and I see you in the chat. You had some really cool questions, and we were talking about it earlier, and I want to throw it on to the rest of you guys to answer. How do you feel about the gap between being able to use Blender and Roblox Studio, and does using Blender give you an advantage over builders who use Studio?
Like we can devote an entire panel section to this topic, but we can't
Here,
do that.
I'll give you guys 5 minutes. I got a timer here. All right, look, let's see. All right, ready? You guys can hear it on the microphone. I'm gonna click.
Oh my god. Oh
All right,
my
we
lord.
got 5 minutes to go. I'm sorry for the headphone warning, guys. All right, you guys have 5 minutes. Good luck.
Alright. This one off.
Oh, I'd be glad to. I think it's weird to say like, does using Blender give you an advantage over people who don't use it? Because I think it can go both ways. If you're someone who only uses Studio, such as myself, and you don't use Blender, you're missing out on a lot of things. Because, for example, lots of organic shapes are really hard to make in Studio. It's a lot harder to make them than it would be in Blender. Because Blender, you can make organic shapes really, really easily because just the way you could work with planes and stuff like that. And I think the opposite goes as well for Studio. There's a lot to be learned from Studio. So if you're someone who only uses Studio and you don't use Blender, yeah, you're missing out on that big section. But it also goes for the opposite. If you're just someone who uses Blender and spends all of their time in Blender and doesn't exactly know the intricacies of Studio and how to use them and all the little things that are Roblox specific, you're also losing out. So I think ideally you want a good mix. You want to be good at both Blender and Studio. You want to know how to make things and what you like. Will it be faster for me to do it with parts? Will it be faster for me to do with meshes? All that kind of stuff. So I think it's complicated. Maybe you get an advantage. Depends how good you are at both. I think ideally you want to mix of both.
So I definitely think that both, even as a Blender user for quite some time, there are times that I insist on using part building methods to do certain things simply because it's fun. I like tackling problem-solving challenges when it comes to building. I actually had a dev forum article on how to build Asian-style roofs in Roblox, and I came up with that method on my own. I also have my own way of building ship hulls using Archimedes and Gapfill. I had one of these comments that asked me why I would bother to make Japanese roofs in Roblox when I could easily do it in Blender, given that I do have Blender experience and I can do that. And the simple answer for me is, yeah, I could do it in Blender, but I think there's charm in building things out of parts more often than not. one of my most recent mech projects, actually, a lot of people ask me if that was made in Blender. I insisted on doing most of it in Studio, even when even when it caused me physical pain to do so. And that's because I actually think part building has a lot of merit and a lot of there's a lot of fun to be had in doing it, even if it's difficult sometimes. But I would agree with Noir's statement that, like, yes, if you are looking to advance your skills and your range of possibilities, definitely do learn Blender. It will give you a lot of convenience in situations where you could very much need it. There's also just the inherent advantage that, like, having Blender experience gives you a wider range of options to use your models in. You'll be able to use your models in different engines, for instance. So Blender is just very versatile. I would definitely recommend it to everyone, but I wouldn't shame anyone for using.
I think once you learn Blender, you start implementing it into your showcases. It unlocks a whole new world of detail, optimization, and the ability to really make anything to fill in your world with. Like the amount of time it takes you just to make a basic rock on Blender compared to Studio, it's phenomenal. It's definitely a tool I think everybody should take the time to learn.
How much time do we have on the clock, Evelyn?
Oh, we have 40 seconds, but if we're done here, then okay, I'm gonna just put the beat down. I'm gonna put in another question from Brian. I'm actually interested to hear from you guys about this. How do you feel that in the building community, low poly artists seem to make much more in the developing community opposed to builders who are focused on realism? And do you think this gap will ever be fixed? Coming from experience myself, since I do commissions and such, I get like a wide range of different types of commissions, and I do generally see that a lot of the low poly ones do end up paying a lot more. And I think that's to do with the demographic that Roblox caters towards is a lot more kid-friendly. Obviously, it's changing now, but I'm interested in hearing what you guys think about that.
A big factor is optimization, because realism tends to be reserved for showcases in which we're not as concerned about performance and gameplay mechanics. You're not going to be able to put as much detail into a game that's playable, which is why I think a lot of game contracts and like level design contracts in particular tend to gravitate towards low poly. I also think that, like, yeah, to a degree, like, the platform is aimed for kids, so there's something very appealing in the low poly aesthetic. Although I can see it changing as optimization gets better. And I think that by implementing things like PBR and like mesh deformation and dynamic clouds, all these new features and like future lighting, I definitely think that there is a case to be made that the platform is going to support more realistic builds in the future. I also do think that there are signs that the main like the demographic of Roblox can orient more towards teenagers than just children. I saw a graph semi-recently. I think you guys might have seen that graph too. The teenage population is actually has been increasing in recent years, as opposed to like the traditionally like under 13 population. So I think that trends may change in the future. Just we're currently kind of like an in-between phase where low poly has been the sort of ruling aesthetic for many reasons.
Yeah, I think one of the things people fail to realize is the showcase community within Roblox is not universal. It's the showcases are a niche of building, which is a niche of the overall community, because most people who play Roblox actually don't build. And most people actually don't have access to that, because I think this I could be wrong in this. The statistic is around 50% of players are on mobile or console, and those mobile or console players don't have access to Studio. They cannot create games. So super high poly builds are a niche of a niche to get into, because a lot of people don't know them. And then also considering the mobile market and stuff like that, lower poly, not just cartoony styles, but lower poly with actual lower polygons usually is an issue with efficiency. And when you want something to run really well, it's sort of a direct translation. The less the computer has to load, the less polygons it needs to know, the better it runs. And then considering the demographic is so big on mobile, it's really, really important that you cater to those people and that you make it accessible to them. So if you, for example, if you make a super high poly build for your functional game and half the people who play Roblox don't have access to it, you're sort of just shooting yourself in the foot there. So it just sort of directly relates. The games who make the most money and can afford to commission people for more are the ones that have the highest access to people and the ones that take full advantage of their player base. You know what I mean? If something that doesn't take full advantage of their player base, doesn't make as much money, can't grow as much as a niche. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of things that people overlook is just, first of all, what Roblox as a platform is, the demographic that is currently on the platform, not the one that they're targeting as of late. And then just also optimization and how niche things are. Because although we are a building community, there's still like very different parts of the building community. Like even after we joined that one Discord Roblox studio community or something, right? Like we all found to see like how much bigger this community really is.
I do think that to a degree, like needing to support mobile is, on the one hand, the biggest source of exposure and revenue for a lot of creators. So it makes sense to leverage that by, sticking to games that can perform well on a range of devices, including mobile. I also do think that it's kind of a huge bottleneck, and this is a very complex topic. I don't know if we have time to get into, but I do think that like it will make it more difficult for developers with certain ambitions to move onto the Roblox platform due to this bottleneck. It definitely throws a wrench in a lot of people's game ideas, where you need to compromise to reach the maximum number of people. On the other hand, I do think that the wide platform, like the wide player base and like the platform of Roblox does a lot.
Aerials. Aerials.
I know, I can't really, I am distracted.
All right. I mean, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Sorry,
move
I'll
on
just
for
try and
that.
wrap up.
I'd like to add a little bit more onto that point, if possible.
Yeah.
I would like to quit. Okay, ignoring what's on the screen right now, I would like to say, being good at low poly and being good at like high poly showcases are not mutually exclusive. Like a lot of the actual base groundwork for both of those things are shared. Like a lot of things like color composition and color theory, in terms of level of like consistency and level of detail, in terms like layout, lighting, all that kind of stuff transcends that sort of area, and you can be really good at those. So if you want to get into low poly work or want to get into high poly showcase work, you most likely already have over half the equation. You know it, and just because you're mainly do something that's like in your main field doesn't mean you can't change to something else, and doesn't mean that you can't do both simultaneously and be good at low poly and for money, and also be good at things that you're more passionate about. You know what I mean? So I don't think there really is too much of an issue of like them one trumping one another, because they're not mutually exclusive.
All right. So, thank you guys for answering that one. So before I move on to some of the live Q&A, I know we're a bit like iffy on the timeline right now. I have one more question for Ray. This one was sent in by I don't know who this guy is. His name is Tobe.
No.
And
Oh,
I just
God.
this question, right? He asks, we all know the pride you take in having created Roblox's original Scarab model, and I think everyone on the panel would agree that if it wasn't for your early model of a Scarab tank from the Halo franchise, Roblox would not be where it is today. I guess my question is, are you a girl?
Oh no. Yes, that's right. I've been exposed. Eagle Ray at your service. Please donate to my PayPal, and I'll send you bathwater and all that other good stuff.
All right. So that's gonna conclude our curated questions. I know we didn't get through too many of them, but hopefully the content of them made up for all of that. So now we're gonna move over to the live Q&A. C-Says, I do see your question, but I'm afraid I'm probably gonna throw it off to some other people that we have not seen any questions for and answer them. So let's see. We have I'm Sinfully Frosty. Yes. Do you feel the popularity of showcases has decreased or increased over the many years it's been around? And what are your thoughts on it and its fate for the future?
I think it's not really a static curve. I don't think they've gotten more or less popular consistently. I think since Roblox is an ever-growing, ever-changing platform, different things they put in may promote showcases or sort of demote them, that kind of stuff. I think generally on an upward trend though, because as Roblox expands and as they create new opportunities for people to come to the platform for whatever reason, and they add more tools to make amazing things, showcases in general have gotten a lot more popular. I think that would be definitely a true statement. I think though, in terms of if they're popular now, I think there's a lot more emphasis in the moment of finding a community that you're part of, such as Cough Cough, one of our 3 communities, or any of the other communities like Roblox Studio community, all those kind of things to get yourself known. Because at the moment, Roblox seems to be favoring bigger games, because you'll notice one of the main showcase tabs, top rated, gets sorted and shuffled down with the new way that the games page works and stuff like that. So the chance that you're going to naturally blow up and get bigger at the moment is not too big. But overall, I think, yeah, showcases are definitely becoming more popular as the platform grows.
I actually kind of want to follow off of what Noir just said in response to one of the other questions, if that's all right, about like, what can you do if you're from Alpha Wolf Boy about like, but it hasn't got much attention. How can you boost that? Roblox is inherently a very social platform. For the most part, you're not going to be able to find success. You've got to get your stuff out there and make your work known. And a big part of a big part of what you can do is, as Noir said, like start participating in communities which share interest in building, such as, you know, like any of our 3 or our associates. I think Twitter's also really big. I'm allowed to talk about Twitter, right? I also think that like Twitter is a pretty big platform due to the nature of like things naturally go viral on Twitter. That's just how the platform works, because like you can see what everyone else is doing, you can retweet things. Twitter is a really big platform for you to get more attention and to also make some connections in the building and game development community. Of course, like you're going to run into some toxicity on Twitter. That's just natural. It's everywhere on Twitter. But as long as you're, for the most part, able to avoid getting yourself in any sort of drama, I think it's a really big benefit for aspiring builders to have a social media presence. I definitely think that contributes a lot. If you're lucky, like your work might get picked up by someone who's better known or has better connections, and then that'll spread to other people, you know, eventually, like maybe like, I don't know, like maybe Roblox staff will come across your work. Like anything is like possible really, but you just have to take the steps to like find yourself a place in the community. Like try not to exist in a vacuum, because no one's just going to really stumble across your stuff coincidentally most of the time.
So I think I'm going to throw it on to you guys. You guys can go through the live Q&A and answer some of the questions you guys find interesting, because I'm curious what you guys want to answer.
There's a question here from Axus that says, opinions on the glass texture, which I'm curious to actually hear your guys' opinions on that as well, because personally, I think the glass texture is great for everything except glass.
Agreed.
I use it for any glossy surface. I use it for ice. You can use it for water. You can use it for like jelly. It's got a lot of interesting properties, but one of the downfalls, unfortunately, is the way it renders things is it doesn't render transparent objects and it doesn't render textures through it. So if you use it for Windows and you use transparent textures, you use transparent objects or textures, you can't see them through the window, and they end up being useless because the whole point of a window is to look through it and see the things on the other end. So, yeah, I'm curious if you guys have any other input on that, because I use it for everything except glass.
Yeah. So alpha blending historically has been one of the most difficult engineering problems for any game or render engine. I'm not the expert on that, but we do have an interview with one of the lighting engineers at Roblox going up on the Stinkguto cast very soon. It may be discussed further there. Yes, the behavior of glass, of not being able to see transparent things through it, it has some uses. Like, for example, if you have a boat in the water, you can use glass to hide the water from clipping through the interior of the boat. Other than that, that's not really as Noir was saying, that's not what glass is used for, though. That's just glass is used for everything except for its intended purpose. I think it's also good for adding reflective material, but you can't use it for windows. So very mixed feelings about glass.
This isn't going to extrapolate very much, but you just reminded me of, oh my gosh, Fishing Simulator. When I played that, I played it for a long time, and they used to have this really cool dynamic water system where it would go up and down. There would be waves and stuff. And it made me very curious, despite it going up and down, you never saw it go in the boat. And it took me a long time to realize, if you look at it from an angle, they were using glass, a very, very low transparency glass. It was probably 0.05 transparency on that glass to take advantage of that effect and make it so that you can't see that transparent water inside the boat. And it was a really, really creative use. I just like to give props. That was a very creative use of glass, and it was something that I think about quite a lot because it's very impressive.
But yeah, honestly, there's so many alternatives to using the actual glass material when you want to make windows. Glass has only very niche use applications as of right now, the way that it's rendered, most of which don't really involve when you actually want to represent glass. So I guess, yeah.
I see we've got 10 minutes left here in the cast. So to Evelyn, I suggest maybe we should do a sort of quickfire rapid round of Q&A if you'd like to present some to us.
Yes. All right. Let's go. I'm sorry if I butchered your name. Kalemixi. He asks, how to make good wood grain?
Make it follow the direction that wood should go and not the way you think it goes.
There's a very useful plugin out there for doing that on the fly, actually.
Scrivant?
Yeah.
Material?
Yes.
Scrivant's a material
use that,
flip.
and you'll have better wood grain. Or, use PBR. But, yeah.
Or learn the ways of the wood reviewer. All right, next question. What's the best group to join?
EBR, next question.
I'm not even going to say anything. I don't even have to.
We've all said our feet.
Next one. Noir, when will you complete Myst? Sob.
There's no plans to complete it at the moment. It's something that I made over the course of about a week. It was something I wanted to finish, but I don't really want to work on that idea any further. I want to explore more ideas.
All right. I'm actually very curious about your answers for this one, and I think we're going to close with this question. It's from Mikal, and they ask, what are your opinions on the new Roblox textures?
Ooh.
I'm very disappointed personally.
Yeah. No hate towards the people that did create those textures, because you can tell they put a lot of time and effort into them, but I personally do not enjoy them in terms of they're really unfriendly for, I find, the majority of users on Roblox, because as I said earlier, showcase building is a niche of a niche. Not everyone, and in fact, the majority of people don't build with a level of detail that can actually justify textures that are that detailed and that are that good looking. And then you get onto the other issues in terms of like, for example, wood planks is only 0.8 studs instead of 1 studs now. So retroactively, if you're someone who used materials very carefully and you made sure that your planks were 1 stud fixed, that you could use 1 plank, that's going to be useless now, and everything is going to be lots of seams everywhere. I think it's very interesting that they tried to put PBR in, but I think it should be a lot more subtle. I think the texture should be a lot more faithful, because they do need to be updated, but I think they should be more faithful to the old ones. I think the PBR should be more subtle while still being there, and I think that they should be more versatile and shouldn't look like exactly what they are, because people don't use materials exactly for what they are. They use them for patterns.
I think that they should just be logical evolutions of the current materials as opposed to... And in terms of going for the realistic look that they're trying to push with the new materials, I've always said this, but I think that the best solution would just be to allow us to create our own tileable PBR textures in place of materials, as opposed to just surface appearance. Like, let us use our own PBR materials that are tileable, and then to apply that to parts. If they add that functionality, I think it's a win-win in terms of upgrading the current materials. I think they should strive to be more faithful to the original textures.
Also got to mention the fact that all these new materials was already made into them.
That's, I didn't want to talk about it, but that part is, I'm sure that can be fixed pretty easily, but the fact that they put out the build with colors in them already is really, really off-putting, especially because something I was actually really excited for was that they added the terrain materials as brick materials, because I'm someone who, ever since I ever started building when terrain came out, I've always loved mixing terrain with parts. And it seemed, oh wow, that's awesome. I can super easily mix terrain and parts now because it has the same textures. But since they already have colors built into them, color matching is a nightmare, because you can't just take the value of your terrain and put it into your part, because it's not going to match up. For example, snow has a blue tint to it, so you have to compensate for that. And in some cases, when you're using, for example, snow, you actually have to darken things and make them more blue than you would want or that would fit the scene, because there's already colors built in. So I'm sure it's easy to fix, but it's not something.
To be fair, the current new material build is just a very, very early version of it. Will be subject to update in the future based on feedback, or at least I hope so. I think it's too early to make a conclusive judgment, seeing as it's not live implemented yet. But I do think that we share similar initial feelings towards what they've put out.
Absolutely.
Right. So we're going to be wrapping up this panel discussion very soon, but one last question. I know I said that the materials one was the last one, but this one was just too important. I could not ignore it. Himpo42 asks, thoughts on neon? I just gotta say, Ray,
no zero transparency white neon. No zero transparency white neon. Okay. I have an actual point to make. Try to avoid using overblown, super high value, super saturated colors, because that's not actually what neon looks like in real life. It's not so insanely blindingly bright, nor is it insanely disgustingly vibrant. I recommend that for all applications of neon, try to use more moderate colors with just a tinge of the tint that you want the neon to be. It'll give a much more natural, soft, and glowy look. Don't oversaturate and don't set your brightness too high. Do not use zero transparency white neon. That's what I have to say about neon.
Yeah, don't go for the double positive there. If you're using the neon material, don't use neon green. You know what I mean? Like, I mix and match. You can use neon green, don't use the neon material. You can use smooth plastic. If you're using the neon material, Ray really honestly said it perfectly. Don't go crazy with it. It can be really awesome, especially for a lot of sort of sci-fi builds and cyberpunk builds and all that kind of stuff, if used in moderation and used properly.
Yeah. On a more serious note, I do agree. Please do not use zero transparency white neon. It is very obnoxious and it hurts people's eyes. Moderate colors are the way to go. They're subtle, but they also work really well. All right, so I think that was the last question that we're going to be answering, because I do want to close this up by 5 or even maybe like 5:02 or something like that. But let's go towards our closing remarks. I'm going to just throw it off to you guys in order. You guys can promote whatever you guys want and just say goodbye, whatever you need to do.
It was nice talking with all of y'all.
I think this was an awesome opportunity, and I really want to get more involved with the community here, because I feel like there's a lot of things I can learn from everyone here, and I feel like there's a lot of things I can teach people here in this community. As a closing remark, I would like to say that EBR is accepting applications, and we've just released a new application form and guidebook, both of which you can find pinned on our Twitter account, which is at EBR_RBLX. If you go there, you can apply, you can read our guidelines, and you can hopefully get in contact with us.
Yeah, this was a really great opportunity. I also think it's very nice that we've taken a step, and this is a very good step for collaboration between our groups. I'd like to do that more often, as well as, like if we can host more panels and informative events in the future, I'd be very happy to participate, or if anything, to support others who are doing so. Yeah, I think the panel went well. It was very nice to have this conversation.
I also want to add on to this. Vivi la RAR.
I was about to say something, but all right, thank you, Ariels. I put everyone's Discord in the chat, so if you guys have the time, please go check those out. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who has come today, everyone who has showed up, and also the people in the RAR Discord who are doing the watch party. Shout out to you guys. But thank you, Ariels, thank you, Noir, and thank you, Ray, so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. And I'm excited to host further panel discussions. Please let me know. We're going to be sending out a feedback email about how this event went, what you would like to change, and if you guys would like future events like this. But besides that, I think we're done and perfectly on the dot too. It is now 5 o'clock. So you guys are all free to go. Thank you so much for being here. I see the chat going on with the Viva la RAR stuff, but yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much. It was good to be here. I'll see you later.
Yep.
Thank y'all guys for this opportunity.
Class.
Thank you for attending.
Class dismissed, guys. You can go to your next classes now. The Zoom meeting is over. I will be ending the recording now. For the people who are still in here, just a quick mention, I will be posting the recording on the Stinkguto YouTube as well as the event page for anyone who wants the archive of it.